What is going on, YouTube people? Neo Cards and Comics here, and today we are actually going to talk about cards and comics. What a novel idea! I haven't talked comic books for quite a while, other than some mail day videos, and a few other pickups here and there. I had the ASM 300, the X-Men 141, and the ASM 238, the Hobgoblin Venom and Days of Future Past that I picked up so far this year. So I've only bought 3 comic books this year, but I've been looking at them like crazy. And then, obviously we look at and talk about sports cards all the time on here. What I was just kind of curious about, honestly, was how the comic book market, roughly speaking, I picked a few handful of examples, has been comparing to the more noteworthy cards on the sports card side of things. So essentially what I did, I picked out, I believe it was 6 key comic books from various different ages, shapes, sizes, price points, etc., and picked out 6 different sports cards. Once again, kind of covering a wide gamut. I'm sure people will argue on both sides. Oh, you should have looked at this instead of this, that, and everything. Whatever. This is just an anecdotal sample. I literally picked this stuff. I don't want to say at random because I had a general idea of what I wanted, but I could have went 100 different directions on both sides to kind of show what's going on. So as we all know, the world sucks. Everything's crashing to zero according to everybody. Regular news stuff, YouTube content creators, IG, it's all going to zero. Rudy the Magic Guy is going to zero. Dustin, going to zero. Everybody's going to zero. Comic books, they're crashing too. Watch Swaggle House's thing, they're going to zero. Everything's going to zero. Perfectly fine. Got it. The collectibles market as a whole, as we all know, all kidding aside, I'm a little tongue in cheek there, has been pulling back for the most part. Sports cards, comic books, whatever. But like I said, what I was curious about is how the two markets kind of compare against each other. So let's start on the sports card side of things, and then we'll hop over to the comic book side of things. So all you sports card guys and girls can click the little button in the corner to close out of the video because you don't give two shoots about comic books. I get it. But let's go ahead and dive in here. I'll run down kind of what I've chosen and on the sports card side and what they have done. And I am going from January 1st. I just wanted a clear line of demarcation. Both cards and comics, I went from January 1 until today. Most of the players that we're looking at are, for the most part, no longer in the league. Comic books, I tried to stay away from stuff that may have had some movie spec tied to it, because that makes things go a little wonky. But up first, like I said, wide gambit here. Giannis Prism Base PSA 10. Rookie 2013. From January 1st until now, it went from 1,700 to 1,450, down 15%. Not a huge drop. His is a little weird. They're playing in the playoffs right now. As I am recording this, Game 5 is in the first quarter. I'm going to finish this and go watch that, see how he does there. So obviously this card could still fluctuate a lot depending on what happens with the playoffs. But the reason I picked Giannis is established resume. Has a title, multiple MVPs, been in the league for a while, Defensive Player of the Year, the best player currently in the NBA, in the modern landscape. In the league today, he is the best player. I don't really think it's particularly that close. Embiid and Joker are both very good, but to me, Giannis is head and shoulders above them. KD, Steph, LeBron, that generation is beginning to show their age. It's now Giannis's league. Prism, it's base, I know, but it's his primary rookie card. And still relatively low population at 2,700. Down a little bit. To go along with him, little baseball, went Mike Trout. Basically rinse and repeat the Giannis argument. Just take away the ever playing in a playoff game. But all the stats to back it up on paper, just no playoff success because he can't even get there. Maybe that changes this year. But we have Trout's 2011 update, PSA 10. Once again, a little bit of a weird one here. Just because he's currently in season. It's actually started pretty strong. And the Angels are playing pretty good. But no change. You could have bought this for $28.50 on January 1st. And you could still get it for $28.50 today. 0% change on that one. So Trout holding steady. Not surprising given his, like I said, kind of strong start to the season. To go along with that, we have Ken Griffey Jr. 89 Upper Deck. printed into the ground. But in a PSA 10, I'm not going to call 4,000 low pop. It's readily available, but it's, they're not everywhere. 2,200 bucks, actually up 10%. Iconic card, iconic player. If you grew up in the 90s, this was your guy. Let's go back in time a little bit now. I pulled out the Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, and Julius Erving 1980 Topps triple card scoring leader thing, the little 3-piece perforated card. I went PSA 8, PSA 7 here. PSA 9, none had sold in a while, and I wanted something that had relatively recent sales. But, we're going back to something that's a little bit more stable, doesn't have the variance in regards to active players, all that stuff. But as we see in both the PSA 8 and PSA 7, and good amount of sales on these, 28 PSA 8s have sold and 51 PSA 7s have sold. Both are down. The PSA 8 is down 20%. PSA 7 is down 14%. So a healthy chunk off both those cards. And once again, absolutely iconic card. I actually wouldn't mind owning one of these at one point in time, just because to get both those guys on the same card with Irving mixed in is pretty special. But down 15 to 20% on that one. Last PSA 10 that sold was a few months ago. It had held steady. PSA 9. Last PSA 9 it had sold a few months ago, held steady. But it had literally been a couple months. It was at like 22,000, I think, and was flat. So no recent sales, so I kind of axed that one. Next, Tom Brady, 2000 Bowman PSA 10. This card has taken a little bit of a beating to start the season. This one, little unfair because it had the yo-yo of him. I'm retired. Oh, wait, I'm back. So this one's kind of bounced around a little bit, but fair is fair. Once again, all-time great player, legacy's established, obviously best player ever to play football. Down 3,500 bucks for a 25% drop on that one. So far, mostly red on the sports card side. Let's get into some like true blue vintage. 1958 Jim Brown Topps. I went with a various amount of grades here because when you get into the higher grades, they just don't sell. But I went PSA 7, PSA 6, PSA 5, and PSA 4 just to give us a good amount of data. I normally hate looking at vintage stuff on charts and graphs like this because the prices could vary so much depending on eye appeal, especially in the mid and lower grades, centering, how good the color is, all that stuff plays key factors. So to me, mid-grade vintage just does not play well with charts and graphs. So I went with a shotgun approach here and just took as many as I could possibly get that had recent sales. That's the other key thing. One of recent sales here, just to kind of get a general health for this card. And as you can see, I'm going to call it ever so slightly flat to trending down. PSA 7 down 3%, PSA 6 down 12%, PSA 5 flat, PSA 4 down 5%. I didn't want to go lower than that because then eye appeal really matters and can really swing the price of a card when you get into the lower grades. So once again, flat to slightly down-ish. So performing okay. You haven't lost your butt on this one at all, and it's a Jim Brown rookie. You're probably doing just fine holding this thing. Let's be honest. Also a card I wouldn't mind adding to the collection at some point in time. I'm not really sure what grade I'd want to go for, but that is those. So generally speaking, sports cards, even these I'm going to call these iconic cards. I think every single one of these on here, I think the one you could probably argue with the most is the Giannis. I'm kind of elevating that card to potential future. And you'll kind of see when we get on the comic book side, I've kind of done the same thing. I've cherry picked some stuff that's, what would be considered vintage versus some mid-modern stuff versus a semi-modern, like a Giannis equivalent. I tried to match them up as best as I could. On the comic book side, let's pop over there. On the comic book side, a little different format here. Kind of did some fanciness. Not really that fancy, but X-Men #1 in a CGC 2.5. Now, same thing. What I did with these was I took the grades, especially on this older stuff, that had the most sales for the calendar year. Some of this stuff, especially like an X-Men #1, just does not pop that often. They just do not transact very often. And I wanted to make sure that I got some sales at the beginning of the year and at least some semi-recent sales. Now, this one did not have super recent sales. Last sale was April 25th, but it had the most sales, or the second most sales this year in the lower grades. This book in a high grade, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I went with a lower grade version to try to compare as best as possible to like the Jim Brown. This X-Men #1, as you can see, absolutely iconic blue chip key. I would put this in the same vein, honestly, as a Jim Brown rookie card, along with a lot of other stuff. Has basically held $9,900. One sold in January, one sold after that for around $10K, then $9,500. And you could see most recent sales in April, $10.5 and $11K. So they have held relatively firm. 10%, margin of error in there, but you could even see the sales in between. This has basically been a 10K book to slightly above 10K for pretty much all of 2022. And something like an X-Men #1 is an absolute blue chip monster, in my opinion. I would love to own one of these at some point in time too. Moving along, Hulk 181, first appearance of Wolverine. Easy to find book, but high demand book. This is on the census count. I don't remember the exact number, but there are a lot of these. You could find this thing anywhere. This would almost be, and I didn't pull one of these on the sports card side of things. It would almost be like the Tom Brady. If you go to a show, you're gonna find a Tom Brady Bowman pretty much anywhere you want. If you go to a big show, if you go to something like an Atlanta show, I'm not even counting like the National, Dallas, any large regional show, you're going to see Tom Brady Bowmans all over the place. PSA 10s, PSA 9s. Hulk 181, same thing. You go out to eBay, IG, whatever, you could find these things everywhere. But it's an absolutely iconic book. First appearance of Wolverine. And once again, dating back to the beginning of the year. These were going for about $7,200. I averaged the first 3 sales there in January. Came out to like $7,500 with that one 8.3K outlier. And then the most recent sale in May was 6.6K. Prior to that, it was holding pretty steady at mid 7s to low 8s to 8, basically. There's an 8K, couple 8K sales in there. So I put it down 13% just because of that most recent sale being almost a full week and a half after the April 28th one. And once again, I tried to mix a grade that had a lot of sales and a grade that had a recent sale. Just to try to get the best of both worlds there. And this one kind of check mark that box, met that criteria. So down a little bit. And I can tell you that in general, this book has been slightly trending down. I see them getting posted on IG at some pretty solid prices. I haven't checked how my 6.5 is doing compared to what I paid for it. That's the one that I own. But last time I looked, it had basically stayed flat to maybe ever so slightly down. So overall down a little bit, but you're not exactly, going broke, losing your butt on this one either. Giant size X-Men #1. You could rinse and repeat a lot of the same things we just said about Hulk 181. This is readily available. You could find you go to a comic book convention, a large size one, or eBay or IG or whatever. There are giant size X-Men everywhere in various different grades. We are looking at a 6.5 here, kind of a mid grade. Up ever so slightly. Really not much up at all. Kind of did a little bit of an up in between. You can see back in January, this was going for about 3.8K. Today, it's going for 3.9K. In between, it floated around that number with a couple sales over 4K. Maybe those were cleaner copies. Maybe those were white pages. Who knows? I have a 7.0 of this book, I believe, in white pages. I paid about $4,600 for mine. I think the last comp on it's $4,500, right around there. So it's down ever so slightly. This one's up ever so slightly. Essentially, this book has basically been flat. Like I said, it did kind of poke up in the middle a little bit, kind of pulled back down again. So essentially, if you bought one of these at the beginning of the year compared to today, you're probably net neutral, most likely, maybe up or down a couple percentage points, but probably not enough to swing anything drastically one way or another. Continuing on here, Ultimate Fallout #4. More of an ultra modern key, probably comparable to I'm going to say like the Giannis rookie here. This book, readily available, high census count, tons and tons of sales on this. So much so, I actually had to split the chart up. You can see over here, I got the early January sales and then the late May sales, and had to skip the middle because there was so many transactions on this thing. So back at the beginning of the year, it was about $3,000. Today, it's about $3,100, up ever so slightly. Not much at all. This book continues to perform extremely well. First appearance, Miles Morales, for those that don't know, or to steal Swaggle House's line if you're watching. What is the significance of this book? First appearance, Miles Morales. Ultra Modern Key. Be weary of the second prints of this. I've done a video on that before. But this is the modern day Spider-Man's first appearance. For a lot of people, Miles Morales is their Spider-Man. This is never going to be at AF-15 values. There's just too many of them out there. It's a little bit of a tougher grade because it came sealed in a poly bag, but has relatively, even though this book is transacted a lot, and this is also readily available, has held price pretty good. And I just watched Reggie Collects does a video of the most books submitted to CGC in a given month. He gets a report directly from them. This one is on it quite a bit and was on the most recent one. So there are even more coming to the census count, but the market does not care. They are there eating them up. I have one of these personally in a second print, which is down since last year, but over the last 3 to 5 months is held relatively firm. And that is something key to mention, both with cards and with comic books. You know, if I ran these back a year and went back to, you know, the spring or early winter for sports cards, or the spring for comic books, this is a bloodbath. If you bought at the peak, bloodbath, regardless of what side of the coin that you're on. That's why I strictly went with from the beginning of the year, just to kind of get a better sense for how things have been holding since then. ASM 300, first appearance of Venom, absolutely iconic book, iconic cover, iconic artist. Probably one of the most recognizable covers when it comes to Spider-Man, and there are a lot of them out there. What has this one been doing? This one has taken a little bit of a beating. Back at the beginning of the year, 6K, currently 5K. And I think I saw one sell on my slabs for just under 5K the other day. And even one back in April sold for $4,700. Now, this one is straddled a little bit with the fact that Venom 2 was pretty bad. This one, ASM 300s are extremely easy to find. Once again, they're kind of everywhere. ASM 300s, and we're looking at a CGC 9.8 here, in a CGC 9.8 are much more rare. It is one of, percentage-wise, one of the lowest percentage-wise books in a CGC 9.8 compared to a lot of the others in its same tier or era, I guess is the word that I'm looking for there. Tons of 9.6s. I have a 9.6 of this that I bought at Chip Shawana not too terribly long ago. I believe that one has stayed relatively flat since I purchased that one. Just double checking real quick. Yes, I paid $17.50. Last comp is $17.90, so that one stayed flat a little bit. CGC 9.8 has pulled back a hair, like I said, 17%. This is the biggest hit, 16.5 technically. Biggest hit on a book on this list. It did get a little overhyped because of the Venom movie. In my opinion, it is continuing to see a little bit of pullbacks on this one. This is an absolute blue chip key though. So that is ASM 300, first appearance of Venom. And then final one, which I almost forgot about, New Mutants 98. Once again, kind of more on the ultra modern tier, very similar to the ASM 300, a little bit more newer than that, but also a highly transacted book. A lot of these out there as well. Same thing on this one. Actually, I had to cut the chart in half. No change on this one. Back in January, going for about $1,800, dipped down to $1,500. This one kind of floats all over hell. Went up to $1,700, up to $1,800, back down to $1,600. Today, very similar things. The last 3 or 4 sales, $1,775, $1,300. I don't know what is up with that $1,300, but someone's going to steal. $1,675, $1,820, $1,600, $1,800 are the May sales. So I'm basically putting this at no change because this thing kind of jumps around a little bit. If you can get one for sub $1,800, not a terrible deal. I bought mine almost 2 years ago now. I think I paid around $1,100 for mine. Um, First appearance of Deadpool, absolutely iconic book. High population in the grand scheme of things for the comic book side of things. Like there's over 4,000 of these now in a CGC 9.8. So readily available in a CGC 9.8, but lots of demand for this book even to this day. And this one has held up relatively fine. And that's with really not a lot of hype or spec behind it. Now, the question is what happens from here? We're in mid-May. If I look at this thing again come Thanksgiving, is it a completely different story comparing cards versus comic books? And overall, which market, air quotes, has done better? Roughly speaking, and once again, very small sample size, it appears that at least the cards and comics that I chose, comic book wise, has performed ever so slightly better than cards. More flat to green. The ASM 300 down 17% is the only real one that's took a massive hit. No change there, 17% there. Basically barely up on the Ultimate Fallout 4. Essentially flat on Giant Size X-Men 1. Hulk 181 down about 10 to 13%. That's a pretty decent hit off that book, at least in the mid grades. Once again, we're not looking at 9.8s of these. Those are $90,000. X-Men 1 up 10%. Iconic blue chip key there. And then switching over to the sports card side, once again, down 20%, 14%, 25% on the Brady. Really, it's the Bird Johnson card, the Brady card, and the Giannis card kind of holding down the sports card category. The Jim Brown, I'm going to call that slightly down. But nothing's really up much. The Griffey up 10%, kind of similar to the comic book side. A lot really wasn't up other than the X-Men 1, and a ton of people aren't getting into that book. For the most part, it was flat to slightly down on the sports card side of things. A little worse than flat to slightly down, in my opinion. So, pretty close to the same. I don't know. What do you guys and girls think? What in this downturn of the markets, what are you doing with your money? I know myself and some others have been discussing lately. Like, I have some cash on hand. I don't know what to do with it. I'm kind of being patient. Maybe I end up being too patient. I don't know, and miss some deals. But I'm just going to kind of sit on the sidelines and see what falls into my lap. Does something that I thought was unattainable become attainable because the price point gets there? I don't know. We'll find out. Curious for what you guys or girls are doing. Hope this was kind of an interesting look comparing the two markets. If you would have liked to see different cards or comics, let me know in the comments down below. Maybe we'll do this again. But other than that, that's all I have for you guys and girls. Like, comment, sub. Catch you on the next one. Peace.